I can't think of a more beautiful way to begin our time together this morning. Thank you so much. Hear these opening words written by Marjorie K. Squire as we gather this morning. Children all, we come together in faith and hope to find meaning that life holds for us, to laugh and sing with one another, to soothe the wounds of daily life, and to grow together in wisdom and love.
Spoken affirmation. Our chalice lighting reading today is by our Minister Emerita, Marjorie Montgomery. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. Please join us now in singing our opening hymn, which is number 6 in the hymnal. Oh, here it is. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Please be seated. During the month of March, we renew our volunteer and financial commitments as part of our annual pledge drive, and we make time during worship to hear from some of the members about the benefits and responsibilities of membership. Please welcome Paul Chapman to come forward and shine his light on stewardship. Paul?
It's a rather dim light. The dreaded season is upon us. Friends, the annual pledge drive is here. If you think the KRA pledge drive is annoying, you ain't seen nothing yet. Things are a bit harder this year. We have to continue to service our debt. Inflation is hitting us everywhere, just like any other place. Utilities cost more, repairs, replacing, upgrading, things cost more. Not to mention stocking up on everyday supplies. And then, of course, you have the occasional unanticipated disaster, like last week when the office computer up and died on us and we had to replace it instantly, if not sooner. On top of that, this isn't exactly a congregation of deep pockets. We are not populated by the well-heeled and the mighty. We are mostly working folks and retired folks, and we have bills to pay, and month to month, our incomes and our outgoes match up. Sometimes there are more outgoes than incomes, but as grim as that looks, it's not all bad. Let us skip to the positive side of the ledger. First, nobody is asking you to pledge more than you are able to. And we all recognize that the unexpected can upset any plans we make. Your pledge is a target, it's not a tax, okay? Second, supporting the church doesn't mean money necessarily. Now, I have a PhD in political science. My area of specialty was campaign finance. And just as with campaign finance, support for the church is a three-legged stool. The legs are time, labor, and money. And they are fungible, they are interchangeable. You can substitute one for the other. Take time. You can volunteer to serve on a committee, a standing committee, an ad hoc committee. Although I'll warn you that some ad hoc committees can go on and on and on. You can participate in local and regional and national public affairs events. Get the name of the church out there. You can participate in demonstrations and conferences and meet and greet people and invite them to church. Maybe they have money. Labor. There is always something around here to do. Paint up, fix up, replace, repair, clean up the grounds, the building. If you have something that's bugging you, a door that won't stay open or won't stay shut, and you happen to have time and a screwdriver, fix it. If you know a particular set of skills, teach somebody else the things you know. That's how our AV team got started. The kitchen crew always needs help. I'm reliably informed that Roy and Joe have dishpan hands up to their elbows, so volunteering in there would be nice. A church is a community. In calculating the wealth of your community, time and labor are your sweat equity, okay? And unless you're the bank holding the note on our loan, sweat equity is much more important than cash. You may be thinking, oh, well, I can do a little here, there, something, but, what's that worth? I'll tell you what it's worth. It's priceless. When it comes to building and holding a community, it is priceless. And that brings us around to the last leg, money, the long green of which we are short of. I blame the kids. We took out a loan and expanded that whole classroom thing on the back of the church. And what did the ungrateful little buggers do? They grew up and moved away. Mostly to states run by Democrats, leaving us stuck with the loan and Greg Abbott. Deep betrayal, that's what it was. Now, when it comes to money, Unitarian Universalists, we do not tithe. The UUA ideally sets the bar at 3%, not 10%. And even that is merely a suggestion. Each of us are asked to give what we can, when we can, and if we can. So when the pledge card is staring you in the face with all those blank slots in it that want filling in, don't think of your pledge just in dollar amounts. Your real contribution to this church is you, not your money. So give generously. Thank you.
So I invite the young and young at heart to come forward for our time for the story of all ages here at the front of the chancel. Thank you. Yay.
We remember.
I appreciate that. Oh, perfect. Oh, there you go. So the story I wanted to kind of talk about this morning comes from, it's a really short story, and it comes from the Christian New Testament. And it goes something like this. There was a woman who had 10 coins, and she lost one of her coins. And so when she discovered that she lost her coin, she began to search diligently for it. So she lit a lamp and she swept the floor. And when she found her coin that she had lost, she gathered her friends together and threw a party so that they could celebrate what she had lost. And that got me to thinking about when I lose something. So do you all remember like the last time you lost something that kind of caused you to panic? This is going to be good. Right? I get that. Yeah. Do you remember something you lost recently?
I lost my worship book when I was running worship.
Oh, that would be a bit of a problem, right? So do you remember what you did? Or do you remember how you... Yeah.
And I asked for help.
Ooh, that's smart. Yeah.
It was actually right on my chair.
Really?
Yeah. Generally, I have to backtrack.
Right. Yeah, I do the same thing. Yeah. And it always makes, I don't know, at least for me, it makes me feel kind of like I'm flustered, and then I also get really disappointed with myself, so kind of like there's a little self-flagellating going on, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, Well, this morning I'm going to talk a little bit about searching. And so maybe kind of our discussion here about when we lose something might shed some light on what it is that we do when we're searching. Thank you for coming up and joining me this morning. I appreciate that. And now we will sing them out.
Let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and hope, for we are now the keepers of the dream. It is our custom to share the undesignated cash offerings that are collected each week. We do this on a quarterly basis for a nonprofit or a charitable organization. Our current Share the Plate recipient is the Center for Transforming Lives here in Fort Worth. From their website, their stated mission is to work side by side with women and their children to disrupt the cycle of poverty throughout Tarrant County. The offering will now gratefully be received. Will the ushers please come forward?
Our reading this morning is an excerpt from the poem, "The Hill We Climb," by Amanda Gorman. You may remember she delivered this poem at President Biden's inauguration. So this is just an excerpt. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll never be tied together, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. Will you now stand as you are able and willing and to sing hymn number 318, "We Would Be One."
At this time in our service, we pause to honor and to give time and attention to those things most important to us. We gather here for healing and for peace in our hearts and in the world, and honor our time together with the shared stories and news from the congregation. Each week, there is a journal outside the entrance to the sanctuary where you can write a message of memory or hope. Also, at any time during our service, you are welcome to come forward and light a candle in our meditation center here at the side of the chancel. Today, from our book of Memory and Hope, we include the following: lifting up those impacted by the storms in California, also those murdered in mass shooting. And on a happier note, Ash is proud to say that his choir got sweepstakes for mixed SATB and varsity SSA, and those letters are for the voices represented in the pieces. Yay, Ash. This is Girl Scout Sunday. Girl Scouts are celebrating their 111th birthday. If you see the sequence 111 or any sequence of ones, that could be a sign that new opportunities are on the way. Do a good turn daily is the challenge this week as we celebrate. Let us open our minds and hearts to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for the healing of pain and the soft, gentle coming of love. We will have 1 minute of silence, and then Misha will comfort us with something beautiful.
Thank you, Misha. So I was approaching the checkout queue when I put my hand in my pocket and discovered, to my surprise, that my wallet was missing. I turned around and I went back to the aisle where I had been just moments earlier, contemplating which pillow I would find most comfortable. My wallet wasn't there, though I vaguely remembered fumbling around with it, trying to hold on to my wallet, a couple other items, all while I'm kind of scrunching up and squishing the pillows and imagining how they might feel after several hours, as if that's possible. I mean, really, how are we supposed to pick out the right pillow? So, feeling frustrated and disappointed with myself for being so clumsy, I retraced my steps. Leaving that store, I dashed to the one where I had been earlier, and I walked through the aisles trying to remember my steps. Seeing nothing, I approached the cashier and asked if anyone had turned in a wallet. No. So, on I went to the next store. Now, I have to tell you that I hardly ever go shopping. I hate it. I feel intimidated by the whole process, and most of the time, so I make my purchases online, so this is not a problem. Well, so I'm in the third and the last store of this particular shopping excursion, and there's no wallet to be had there either. So I'm panicked, I'm feeling frazzled. So finally I returned to the first store where I had realized my wallet was missing, and I went to the return desk. And fortunately, there it was. Someone, a very kind and caring individual, had returned everything intact. The frantic and all-consuming search for my wallet reminds me of the woman in this Christian New Testament story who lost her coin. For her, however, the search surely had an even more desperate feel to it, because she had only 10 coins and she lost one. So 1/10 of what she had was gone. I can't imagine that. So with diligence, she searched the most likely place she would find her missing coin, in her house. The story says that she lit a lamp. We have to use our imaginations to take ourselves into that world and into hers so that we could understand that search. Her house would have been dark. Most likely the only outside light being that coming in through an open door, or perhaps one small window. The poor couldn't have afforded more than that. I can almost see her in my mind's eye, lighting the lamp so that she can see by a small ray, not much, but marginally better than without it. Can you imagine her heart pumping at the amount of what she had lost? Maybe she had to work to keep her hands from shaking as she picked up her small broom and began to move it across the floor. The floor was most likely dirt, a surface that would make it almost impossible to see a dull coin. I imagine she used her ears rather than her eyes to assist her in her search. I can see her bending slightly, her ear to the ground, listening for the tinkling sound the coin would make when the bristles of her broom brushed over it. She was so completely thrilled when she found her coin that she called her friends to help her celebrate the treasure that she had found. I've been wondering lately if I'm as diligent as she in searching, not for my missing wallet, but for what makes life more than a race driven by consumption. The fourth principle of UU, as you know, is a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. I appreciate putting this idea so clearly up front and center. Do you remember the 1972, I'm taking you back a ways, the 1972 album created by a group of feminists at the initiation of Marlo Thomas, and it was called Free to Be, You and Me. Do you remember it? Oh, okay, that's wonderful, Minnie. Its aim was to teach children that boys and girls aren't all that different, that every child, no matter gender, can wear whatever, like whatever, behave however they want. That every child can be free to just be. One stanza and chorus went like this: I see a land bright and clear, and the time's coming near when we'll live in this land, you and me, hand in hand. Take my hand, come along, lend your voice to my song. Come along, take a hand, sing a song. For a land where the river runs free, for a land through the green country, for a land to a shining sea, for a land where the horses run free, and you and me are free to be you and me. I loved this album when I was young. I don't recall who gave it to me or if I purchased it myself. For Christmas one year, my grandmother gave me my own record player. It was red and white. And when I first saw it, I was so amazed that I might own something so thoroughly wonderful. I must have played this album on that record player 1,000 times, singing along with it at the top of my lungs. I lived on a farm, so the only things that could hear me were the cattle and the horses. It was okay. What fascinated me is that I had completely forgotten about this album until I heard an interview recently about it on NPR. I hadn't even realized it was a feminist project designed to encourage girls, especially to imagine being more than a princess who gave herself up for the first prince who showed any interest. And it isn't like I haven't thought about my youth, trying to understand why my feminist commitments are so much more pronounced than any of my 3 sisters or my mother. So I want to suggest today that at least one aspect of a free and responsible search for truth is remembering. I appreciated Reverend Lori King Nelson's sermon last week that invited us to remember the history of Unitarian Universalism that involved the coming together of 2 religious traditions, and that in their reflections and commitments about who they would be together was included as their first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every human. And how she so clearly connected this idea to what it means on the ground. In other words, how we interact with and treat our neighbors, even those who maybe get on our nerves every now and then. And she mentioned how sometimes this idea gets twisted by some who misunderstand it and claim it's a clarion call for individualism. She noted that, in fact, the worth and dignity principle is not about us as individuals, but rather a call to action that recognizes our neighbors. I wonder, too, if sometimes in our search for truth and meaning, we fall into the trap of thinking that the fourth principle is largely about believing that truth or the right truth is the ultimate thing we attain. Such thinking has gained momentum in recent years, where the idea of believing has really taken the center stage. Since the Enlightenment period, people have begun to understand belief solely as a cognitive function, a feature of our minds. To believe is to make a mental assent to an idea. So in this scenario, a free and responsible search for truth could easily be seen as being released to think whatever we want. Or, as Helen Brandenburg says, to wave the flag of religious freedom. Karen Armstrong, a well-respected scholar of religion, explains that religion, as defined by the great sages of India, China, and the Middle East, was not so much a notional activity, but a practical one. It did not require belief in a set of doctrines, but rather hard, disciplined work without which any religious tradition remained opaque and incredible. Armstrong goes on to explain that until the modern period, the major Western monotheisms all considered themselves primarily with practice, the doing of religion rather than doctrine. A good Muslim was someone who stood alongside and supported the pillars. A good Jew observed the Sabbath and remained committed to the law and the ritual year. And a good Christian embodied the Sermon on the Mount by caring for the marginalized, promoting compassion and peace, and sharing God's love. The term religion itself fascinates me. The Latin words are re, which means again, and lig, which means to join or to connect. So the common translation of religion is to join again or to reconnect. Or maybe, as I want to think about it today, to remember. So while I recognize the problem of the term, to reconnect suggests that we somehow have unconnected ourselves, and I don't think that's actually possible. We are always human. We are always part of this universe. We are always in the womb of mystery. We are always deeply connected to each other. We do sometimes, though, forget. And it's in our forgetfulness of our connection to divinity and to humanity that religion, when understood in its intent, is poised to step in and help us remember, leaning into new stories, taking up a new practice, maybe a ritual, seeking wisdom from our community. All of these are ways in which we can employ aspects of religion to assist us in recalling our fundamental potential to love others more generously and graciously. Many people know about the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. Yes? You've heard of Thich Nhat Hanh, but few people know about Sister Tran Kong, who practiced and worked with him for many years in Vietnam and also in Plum Village, his retreat center in France. When she was a young girl in Vietnam, she wanted to study and understand Buddhism, but she was also acutely aware of great suffering all around her. People living in poverty who were constantly hungry. So she approached her Buddhist teacher, asking him why Buddhists didn't do more for people, like the Catholics who were a minority in their country. And his response to her was this: Buddhism changes people's hearts so that they can help each other in the deepest, most effective ways, even without charitable institutions. She wasn't all that satisfied with his answer. And the more that she pressed him, the more he seemed to provide answers that left her more and more uncomfortable. So her response was not to turn her back on Buddhism, but rather to lean in more fully, giving all of her time and attention to learning and practicing. And she found new and creative ways to help the people around her who needed food and clothing and housing and education. And for her, Buddhism without action made no sense. And it helped her to ascertain the best way forward was for her to do the work she felt called to do. So she writes this: when you want something ordinary, you can just go out and buy it. But when you want something extraordinary, like love, understanding, peace for a whole nation, you have to pay for it with something much more precious than money. Sister Kong's search is remarkable in many ways, but especially in how she's not the center of it, but rather the needs of people around her. Her neighbors, loved ones, communities, they were the ones who motivated her search for truth. It wasn't about her gain. Now, many acknowledge that the fourth UU principle, the free and responsible search for truth, can be seen as a macho, chest-thumping exercise designed to win the winner, take-all category of beliefs. The reality, though, is that the free and responsible search go together. It's as if responsible serves as the guardrail for the free. I saw an illustration of what I'm trying to say this last week at a church meeting. There was a discussion about whether or not it was time to remove some signage from the church property, signage that had been intended to convey a protest. And there were essentially two positions offered. Those whose identity hadn't been challenged, in other words, the cisgendered people, were more ready to suggest that the protest had served its purpose and was no longer necessary. On the other hand, those whose identity had been the source of the protest, those from the LGBTQIA community, were more hesitant to think it's time to move on. The unsaid perspective was not voiced, that those who are most affected by virtue of being the minority should be given a greater voice in the decision. How very, very hard it is for us, given our situation in an individualist culture, where it's easy for us to put ourselves first, to change our perspective and put the other first. This is our challenge, it seems to me. How do we move on from our default of always seeing our own position and then only belatedly realizing we need to change our perspective? Viktor Frankl, who was a Jewish Austrian psychiatrist whose work stemmed from his experience of being in concentration camps, I feel like he offered a helpful clue when he said this: We needed to stop asking about the meaning of life and instead think of ourselves as those being questioned by life, daily and hourly. That life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problems and to fulfill the tasks which it constantly sets before us. So I have a whole bunch of questions to leave us with. What is life asking of us? When our world interrogates us, do we understand that our search for truth and meaning is bound up in our neighbor's access to food and clean water? That my happiness is wedded to my neighbors, all of them, regardless of who they are or who they love? That my hope for connection is met in my community's hope, which means that those on the margins need to be brought to the center, where bridges are built to accommodate those with mobility challenges, where education is not doled out with advantages to those who have money and power. Do I recognize the times when I center my searching, my beliefs, without regard for how they affect those around me? Does my searching result in a better world, especially for people with less privilege than I have? I told you, lots and lots of questions. So I'll just leave us with one final question. When life questions us, what story will be found? When life questions us, what story will be found? Let's continue to ruminate on that as we sing our closing hymn, which is number 354. We laugh, we cry. Will you stand as you are?
We'll now extinguish the chalice. The chalice reading is from Amy Zucker Morgenstern. Never has it been more true than now. We extinguish this flame, but the sparks within us remain alight. And from each of us in our supposed solitude, the signals buzz and hum, sparking through space one to another, connecting us invisibly but palpably. We are one, and from every window, our light shines.
I want to invite you, following the benediction, to stay for coffee and conversation. Hear now this benediction that we just sang. And we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a joy being together. And our search for peace, maybe we'll finally see, even to question, truly is an answer. Go in peace.